One, two, three. D for der. The seventh tree is the oak, the tree of Zeus, Jupiter, Hercules, the Dagda, the chief of the Irish gods, Thor, and all the other thunder gods, Jehovah insofar as he was El, and Allah. The royalty of the oak tree needs no enlarging upon. Most people are familiar with the argument of Sir James Frazer's Golden Bow, which concerns the human sacrifice of the oak king of Nemi on Midsummer Day. The fuel of the midsummer fires is always oak. The fire of Vesta at Rome was fed with oak, and the need fire is always kindled in an oak log. When Guion writes in the Cadgadu, stout guardian of the door, his name in every tongue, he is saying that doors are customarily made of oak as the strongest and toughest wood, and the doer, the Beth Louise Nyon name for oak, means door in many European languages, including Old Gaelic Dorus, Latin Forus, Greek Thura, and German Tur, all derived from the Sanskrit dur and the Daleth. The Hebrew letter D means door. The what is that? The L being originally an R. Yeah. Midsummer is the flowering season of the oak, which is the tree of endurance and triumph, and like the ash is said to court the lightning flash. Its roots are believed to extend as deep underground as its branches rise in the air. Virgil mentions this, which makes it emblematic of a god whose laws run both in heaven and in the underworld. Poseidon, the ash god, and Zeus, the oak god, were both once armed with thunderbolts, but when the Achaeans humbled the Aeolians, Poseidon's bolt was converted into a trident, or fish spear, and Zeus reserved the sole right to wield the bolt. It has been suggested that oak oracles were introduced into Greece by the Achaeans, that they originally consulted the beech, as the Franks did, but finding no beeches in Greece, transferred their allegiance to the oak with edible acorns, its nearest equivalent, to which they gave the name phagos, which, as has been mentioned, is the same word as fagus, the Latin for beech. At any rate, the auracular oak and Dodona was a phagos, not a drus, and the oracular ship Argo was, according to Apollonius Rhodius, largely made of this timber. But it is more likely that the Dodona oracle was in existence centuries before the Achaeans came, and that Herodotus was right stating on the authority of the Egyptian priests that the black dove and oracular oak cults of Zeus and Ammon in the Libyan desert and of Zeus at Dodona were coeval. Professor Flinders Petrie postulates a sacred league between Libya and the Greek mainland well back into the 3rd millennium BC. The Ammon oak was in the care of the tribe of Garamantes. The Greeks knew of their ancestor Garamus as the first of men. The Zeus of Ammon was a sort of Hercules with a ram's head akin to ram-headed Osiris, and the Amun-Ra, the ram-headed sun god of Egyptian Thebes, from where Herodotus says that the black doves flew to Ammon and Dodona. The month, which takes its name from Jupiter, the oak god, begins on June 10th and ends on July 7th. Excuse me. Midway comes St. John's Day, June 24th, the day on which the oak king was sacrificially burned alive. The Celtic year was divided into two halves, with the second half beginning in July, apparently after a 7-day wake or funeral feast in the oak king's honor. Sir James Frazer, like Guion, had pointed out the similarity of door words in all Indo-European languages and shown Janus to be a stout guardian of the door, with his head pointing in both directions. As usual, however, he does not press his argument far enough. Doer, as the god of the oak month, looks both ways because his post is at the turn of the year, which identifies him with the oak god Hercules, who became the doorkeeper of the gods after his death. He is probably also to be identified with the British god Lear, or Lud, or Nud, a god of the sea, i.e. a god of a seafaring Bronze Age people who was the father of Credilad, Cordelia, an aspect of the White Goddess, for according to Geoffrey of Monmouth, the grave of Lear at Leicester was in a vault built in honor of Janus. Geoffrey writes, Cordelia, obtaining the government of the kingdom, buried her father in a certain vault which she ordered to be made for him under the river Soar in Leicester, and which had been built originally under the ground in honor of the god Janus. And here all the workmen of the city, upon the anniversary solemnity of that festival, used to begin their yearly labors. Since Lear was a pre-Roman god, this amounts to saying that he was two-headed, like Janus, and the patron of the new year, but the Celtic year began in the summer, not in the winter. Geoffrey does not date the mourning festival, but it is likely to have originally taken place at the end of June. The old wakes, the hiring fairs of the English countryside, came to be held at various dates between March and October, according to the date of the locals' Saints' Day. At Bunbury Wakes, ryegrass and clovers should be ready to cut. At Wenbury Wakes, early apples are ripe. English Dialectic Dictionary. But originally they must all have taken place at Lammas, between the hay harvest and the corn harvest. That the wakes were mourning for the dead king is confirmed in chapter 17. The Anglo-Saxon form of Logohamas, mass in honor of the god Lu, or Lu, was half-mass, loaf-mass, with reference to the corn harvest and the killing of the corn king. What I take for a reference to Lear as Janus occurs in the closing paragraph of Merlin's prophecy to the heathen king of Vortigern and his druids, recorded by Geoffrey of Monmouth. After this, Janus shall never have priests again. His door will be shut and remain concealed in Aridine's crannies. In other words, the ancient Druidic religion based on the oak cult will be swept away by Christianity, and the door, the god Lear, will languish forgotten in the castle of Ehrenhod, the Corona Borealis. This helps us to understand the relationship at Rome of Janus and the white goddess Cardia, who is mentioned at the end of chapter 4 as the goddess of hinges, who came to Rome from Alba Longa. She was the hinge on which the year swung, the ancient Latin, not the Etruscan year, and her importance as such is recorded in the Latin adjective cardinalis, as we say in English, of cardinal importance, which was also applied to the four main winds, for winds were considered as under the sole direction of the great goddess until classical times. As Cardia, she ruled over the celestial hinges at the back of the north wind, around which, as Varro explains in his De Re Rustica, the millstone of the universe revolves. This conception appears most plainly in the Norse Edda, where the giantess Fenja and Menja, who turned the monstrous millstone Groti in the cold polar night, stand for the white goddess in her complementary moods of creation and destruction. Elsewhere in Norse mythology, the goddess is ninefold. The 9 giantesses who were joint mothers of the hero Rig, alias Hemendal, the inventor of the Norse social system, similarly turned the cosmic mill. Janus was perhaps not originally double-headed. He may have borrowed this peculiarity from the goddess herself, who at the Carmentalia, the Carmentia festival in early January, was addressed by her celebrants as Postvorta and Antevorta, she who looks both back and forward. However, a Janus with long hair and wings appears on an early stater of Malos, a Cretan colony in Cilicia. He is identified with the solar hero Talus, and a bull's head appears on the same coin. In similar coins of the late 5th century BC, he holds an 8-rayed disc in his hand and has a spiral of immortality sprouting from his double head. Here at last I can complete my argument about Arenhod's castle and the whirling round without motion between three elements. The sacred oak king was killed at midsummer and translated to the Corona Borealis presided over by the white goddess, which was then just dipping over the northern horizon. But from the song ascribed by Apollonius Rhodius to Orpheus, we know that the queen of the circling universe, Eurynomé, alias Cardia, was identical with Rhea of Crete. Thus Rhea lived at the axle of the mill, whirling around without motion, as well as on the galaxy. This suggests that in a later mythological tradition, the sacred king went to serve her at the mill, not in the castle, for Samson, after his blinding and enervation, turned a mill in Delilah's prison house. Another name for the goddess of the mill was Artemis Callisti, or Callisto, most beautiful, to whom the she-bear was sacred in Arcadia, and in Athens at the festival of Artemis Brauronia. A girl of 10 years old and a girl of 5, dressed in saffron yellow robes in honor of the moon, played the part of sacred bears. The great she-bear, the little she-bear, are still the names of the two constellations that turned the mill round. In Greek, the great bear Callisto was also called Hellas, which means both that which turns and willow branch. A reminder that the willow was sacred to the same goddess. The evidence given in the Guion context at the close of chapter 6 for supposing that the oak cult came to Britain from the Baltic between 1600 and 1400 BC suggests that the Beth Louise Nyon sequence, in which Dur is the principal tree, was at any rate not elaborated before 1600 BC, through the rowan, willow, elder, and alder were perhaps already in sacred use. Gwen, the white one, son of Lear and Lud, was buried in a boat-shaped oak coffin in his father's honor. He was a sort of Osiris, his rival Victor, son of Scorcher, being a sort of Set, and came to be identified with King Arthur. His name supplies the prefix Win of many ancient towns in Britain. And that's where I'm going to stop.